Simone Claridge here, and I have a really wonderful lady here. It is Simone Gisondi, and I met her a couple of days ago, if you want to say so. We had already a beautiful interview. She has her own radio show, and what are you looking into and what you are helping other people with?
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Simone. I'm so grateful to be on your show. I very much appreciate the opportunity. So as you know, I think initially we ran into each other at the International School of Detoxification in Florida. I was studying detoxification under the great Dr. Morse. And I love what I studied there, and I've been able to apply it to myself. And this is what my radio show and my podcast is all about how to achieve great natural health through the means of detoxification and living a healthy, natural life. I implement different modalities for myself and for my family. With regards to essential oils, a great diet, movement, exercise, those kind of things. And of course, foundationally, what you deal with the most with energy, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and those kind of things. So that's what my show is about. And I bring in guests as well, just like you do, to talk about different aspects of health. And by no means am I a specialist or an expert in anything that outside of detoxification, because that's what I studied. So I like to actually interact with different individuals that are experts in their field so that we can bring as much information to people so that they know what they need to do for their health.
Right, that's where I'm coming as well. So that's how we met. And the fun part was that we both are not medical doctors. We both are helping with the abilities we have. And that's totally fun. And it is, for me, the part of that we come together now and share is so much more important. We collaborate. Simone has her specialty, I have my specialty, and you probably realize that her name is Simone and my name is Simone. And that's what we started to giggle about, so that's pretty cool. But it's just, your life has been, especially recently, not always about giggling, right? So there was a reason why you got into detoxification, why you're doing what you're doing now, that you help people to open up for other opportunities to make themselves healthy again and empower them. I had the sense for you, and that's why I was very drawn to you. So just let the people know, how do you get there? Because often we say things, but there is a history behind. And to unravel that for people will help that, oh my God, she did this. Okay, she had not the best situation either, right? So she looks beautiful and great now, but what happened, right? So it helps us to also find our truth and our strength. So Simone, how did you get there?
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, you know what, actually, it's a crazy story. I had a stroke back in 2011, which was a big wake-up call, and I call that a blessed hardship. Actually, and I call it blessed because it taught me so much and it opened such a new world. And first and foremost, I want to say that it's such a great time to be alive because we have access to so much wisdom and so much information, and we have the means to share with others, just like you and I have been able to collaborate, and we have the means to be able to share our wisdom and our knowledge and what we learned with the world. And I was lucky enough at that time, in my time of hardship, that I was able to have access to information and wisdom and knowledge that helped me heal. I don't leave the healing to other people, to doctors or anybody else. The body is actually what heals, and my body healed because I actually supported it. So Dr. Morse was actually such a force in my life. My really good friend introduced me to Dr. Morse and the whole idea of detoxification. So when I went through the stroke, what happened is I actually ended up in the hospital, and of course the medical doctors used the typical protocols that they use on people that come in with strokes. The whole thing that perplexed me is the fact that when I presented at the hospital, I wasn't the typical stroke victim that's overweight with high blood pressure or a smoker or anything like that. I was actually, and they were quite shocked as well. First and foremost, because I was quite young. And second, because I was very thin. I was a runner. I was an athlete. I've been my whole life. I had what I consider to be a very clean diet. My blood pressure was actually quite low, on the low side, not on the high side. I was not a smoker. I wasn't eating a lot of salt. So I had none of the typical things that they check off when they deal with people that have strokes. So it was quite a learning experience for me. And I was incredibly, incredibly shocked to be told that I actually had a stroke. And to go into your realm of wisdom and expertise, to be honest with you, before I actually heard the word stroke, I just thought that I just wasn't feeling well. And it wasn't such a bad thing. It was just an off day. And I thought, why do I have this incredibly horrible headache? What can I take for it? How can I make it go away? So I was in a very neutral space. I didn't know what was actually happening. And then only when I got to the hospital and they checked me out, they said, you had a stroke. So it was in that moment that the whole thing became such a negative thing. And panic set in. And of course, I was traumatized. And, you know, we hear in the news and we read in newspapers and wherever we read that strokes are typically associated with people that end up, you know, in a wheelchair, or they end up being severely handicapped. They have to be cared for. Sometimes they die. I mean, heart disease, which is related to, of course, this is part of the cardiovascular disease stream. Typically, people die because of that. And the doctors did a whole bunch of tests, of course, and they told me that the next stroke, and of course, once you have the first one, you're at high risk for a second one. The next stroke would kill me, and that if it had been just a little bit over, I don't know how much, in my brain, I probably would have been a vegetable, or it would have killed me. So it was quite eye-opening. And of course, fear sets in when you hear these kind of things from the doctors, right? So it was actually, in my opinion, when the conversation went there, that's when it actually became worse. Up until that point, it was just, oh, I have a really bad headache, and what can I do today? I should actually rest a little bit more. I was very driven. I had a lot of things on the go. Was raising 2 children. So it was just another day. Nothing unusual except for a bad headache. And then, of course, the whole big thing came when I got that diagnosis of stroke. And of course, the doctors used their cookie cutter approach to strokes, regardless of how old I was, regardless of the fact that I wasn't overweight, regardless of the fact that I didn't have high blood pressure. They did the same test that they do for all stroke patients, and they used the same healing protocols that they use for most patients. And then when they sent me home, when I was actually let go out of the hospital, they gave me the same protocol. I had to take the little blood thinner, just like all other patients take. I had to take certain medications for my head. I had a little bit of a speech impediment as a result of the stroke, because that's the area of the brain that was affected. And they call that aphasia, speech aphasia. And so I had to deal with that. But I have to tell you that those words of the fact that a second stroke would kill me, and that, you know, I could have easily died if it had just been a little bit over, like a millimeter or so in my brain, those things really, really hit me hard. And of course, the whole idea of dying and leaving my kids behind without a mother, especially because they were so young and I was so young, was was quite traumatizing for me. So it was from there that I actually had to really start working. I had no answers as to why I had the stroke diagnosis. I questioned all the doctors. I questioned my family doctor. I questioned the neurologists that I worked with. I actually started going to a stroke prevention clinic so that I can make sure that I prevent the second stroke from occurring. But nobody was able to give me any answer as to why I had a stroke. Like, what is the reason why people in their early 30s have a stroke? when they're very healthy, they're athletic, they have what is considered to be a good diet. So to this day, I don't have a reason. They sort of chalked it up to being stressed. It was actually that really sort of opened my eyes to the fact that sometimes it's not something physiological that actually causes disease and illness, that it's actually something that's more energetic that causes illness and disease. So I started seeking what are the reasons why we have these kind of things if there's no physiological reason for them. And it was then that I started looking into things and studying. I listened to Dr. Morse. He's very detailed in the realms of how your energetic body actually gets affected by certain things in life, how things are affected by your thoughts, how things are affected by your feelings and your emotions and your interactions with other people, with or they're related to your outlook on life. Do you see things from a perspective of positivity or one of negativity? And it was then that I started to see, and I paid close attention to how I was feeling, and I got to see that actually a lot of all of that had to do with all the negativity that I was holding inside of me. My inability to forgive people for the wrongdoings against me, my inability to look at the positive that I had in life instead of the things I didn't have. It was actually I've always been driven and ambitious, and there were always things I wanted to get and to achieve. So I was constantly looking at, well, I'm not going to be happy until I achieve, this thing, or I'm not going to be happy until I get this thing. And I was missing out completely on the great things that I had in my life. And to this day now, I'm very grateful. I have healthy children, my biggest blessing. I have my health. Obviously, that was actually that was the biggest blessing that I thought in that moment, the fact that I didn't die and I was able to recover. So I set forward on learning more and realizing what exactly was it, aside from the energetic part of this stroke, what else was I doing? So listening to Dr. Morse, I realized the power of the foods that we eat and how they nourish our body so that we can actually keep it healthy. And I was able to understand that some of my nutritional habits were actually not conducive to health at all. They were more geared towards how I can look, how I can function with regards to my athleticism and why I wanted to look a certain way and what weight I wanted to be. It was very disconnected from my body. I was not in line with what my body was asking for. I was sort of maybe following typical diets that people prescribed, to be able to lose weight and to have muscle and all these kind of crazy things. And so I changed all of that. And here I am. And the only thing that I have to say I regret, because I know I called that stroke a blessing, and it still is, I only wish that I had stumbled upon all of this wisdom and information and knowledge to be able to apply to my life before I had the stroke.
I totally hear you. That is an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing, because there's also hope in your story. I love that about that, because of you're very strong in your energy, right? So me as a person is more trained for that. It can see that. So in this sense, no matter who's working with you will benefit from just that ability to look straight and, be energetic enough to move through, which is always important. Moving through certain things in life, they keep us away from what we truly feel and desire, right? So, but I think that we talked, the last interview we had together, we talked about it, that you actually came from a very different background. Because of, you have been raised and brought up in a different country, which we will talk then hopefully about it. Me too, we found our similarities, not just in the name. Yes. We both came from a different system. The most people have no clue how this can affect a person, and you grew up in this as well as I did, but I was closer to, I mean, to the border between the capitalism and the socialism system, so they couldn't mess up that bad. You have been in a different country, so how was you raised? What was your experience as a young person that maybe even interferes now as an adult with what's going on, with maybe with a stroke? You may have found even some parallels to that. And what did you change on that perspective that really kicked ass for you? Sorry.
It definitely kicked ass. To be okay, yes. So I actually was born and raised in Romania, very, very communist country at the time when I lived there. So we grew up, myself and of course my family. I have a younger brother. We grew up with food being rationed, with electricity being rationed, and water being rationed. We were sort of at the hand of the government to give us what we needed to survive. So, of course, in my youth, I didn't have the wisdom to know that, to look at it in a positive or a negative way. Only now that I'm older, I'm able to look back, and I'll tell you, on the positive side, it taught you to make do with what you have, and it did. I got to see my parents sacrifice so much for me, so it taught me how to be a parent, of course, and how to sacrifice and give to my children. Mentality-wise, it teaches you to be really tough. So I attribute my strength to get through my stroke, instead of being a victim, my upbringing in such a, what I would say would be, let's say, or what's considered to be a harsh environment, was actually something that really gave me the strength. And I've seen this in my father. My father actually had cancer twice. So I saw that he had such a will to live. And of course, even his ability to escape the communist regime to come to North America was also something that had taught me the drive and the will and the unwillingness to accept any other outcome other than the one that you want. So when you want to be well, it's all within your power to actually drive forward to get to that destination. And I learned that from my parents, both of whom I owe so much to, not only because they gave me the opportunity to have a better life here in Canada, but also because they taught me life lessons. And sometimes life lessons are not learned by sitting down and having somebody tell you, do this or do that. You can learn life lessons just by observing. So I owe a lot of that to my parents. I've observed how they behaved and how they just made do with what we had. And they gave to us, to myself and my brother, as much as they had. And they always strived. So yeah, the mentality there, and I remember seeing Romania is also a country that's well known for gymnastics. And I think everybody out there knows about Nadia Comaneci. The perfect 10s that she got in the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. And to be honest with you, yes, the training was always that no other outcome is even possible other than the one that you want. So that's how I looked at it. After I had my stroke, I looked at it exactly how it was back home, back in my home country. No other outcome is even possible other than me healing. And no other outcome is even remotely possible other than me going forward and regaining my health and regaining my life and being able to move forward renewed, reborn, and with renewed strength and the ability to overcome even harder things. So yes, I'm actually quite grateful that I had the upbringing that I had, and it taught me so much. And it's a blessing. It's a blessing that I was able to have those hardships even as a child, because it really infused so many ideas in my head about how to overcome. And of course, looking around.
I'm sorry that I interrupt, but please make an example how, like, one day as a child, as you grew up, just make a brief summary of how a day looked like, food-wise, what to do, and so maybe people can understand where I mean, where your strength coming from, and then how you, I mean, dealt with problems in life, you know, so how you came out of the stroke because of that.
Oh, yes. So typically in the morning, we would wake up quite early. I would wake up with my mother, or if I was near my grandmother, we lived close to my grandmother. And we would go and we would have to stand in line, a very, very long line, to get, let's say, the basics like bread and milk, things like that, that they would give to us. And we had rations of, let's say, oil that you would cook with, and let's say things like sugar, things of that nature, the basics, the staples that everybody would have in the household. And of course, another great thing about it is that it was such a community, because you would always see the same people in the lineup. So you kind of made friendships. And I remember my mother would have, you know, her friends, and I would play with those people's kids. And so we didn't know. We just knew that we were going to get food, and we would come home with food, and life was great, and nothing was wrong. And of course, you know, I also learned that when you have less choices, it's actually much easier, because you don't have the temptations of going and doing crazy things that really destroy your health. So we had the basics. So I would stand in line with my mother or my grandmother. We would get the food, we would go home. Then my mom would have to get me ready for school, me and my brother, and then she would go to work. So she did everything that she could in a real rush in the morning, and then she would, you know, drop us off at school, and then she would go off to work. I'm the older one between myself and my brother. I think I mentioned earlier, my brother's younger than me. So at the end of the day, I would go pick him up, and then we would go home, and we would wait for our mom to come home. My dad was working, lucky him, he was working actually in the Navy. So he was working on a ship. So he was always, I guess, out of the country, for lack of a better term, extensive periods of time. And when he would be home, of course, we would be sort of together as a family. But, and of course, when he escaped the communist regime, he did so as a stowaway. So he had to hide on a ship and sort of declare himself a refugee when he got to another country. And then we sort of brought our family together when he got to Canada. But yeah, so my mom would sort of come home from work many times. I have to tell you, I remember some of the negative things. My brother and I would have to go up the stairs. We lived in a building on the 4th floor. It was actually, back then, believe it or not, I know that in North America, it's such a great thing to own a home. Back then in communist regime, it was actually the it thing, you know, was to actually live in a building and to live in an apartment, not in a house. So we lived in an apartment. So we were sort of the well-off kind of people because we lived in an apartment. But many times, like I was saying earlier, we would have rationed electricity. So between certain hours, they would turn off the electricity. So we wouldn't have any access to any electricity. So you had to stay in the dark, more or less. So I remember I would pick up my brother and we would come home and we would literally have, my mom would give us a candle and some matches, and we would sort of light the match and light the candle, and we would use the candle to sort of illuminate the way upstairs so that we could get up to the 4th floor, which is where we live. And so those were scary times because I hated the dark. I hated it, and I was petrified of the dark. So that's how, and you know, of course, you also had to hold the light to the lock so that you could see how you unlock the door. We would get inside and we would wait for my mom to come home, and she would have to go through the same thing. And when she would come home, she would just sort of put together dinner for us. We would eat family, and then she would put us to bed. She would bathe us and put us to bed. We would have to wait for a certain hour to come so the water could be on. And everybody would have to, we would rush to make sure we take our baths within that time frame because otherwise the water would get shut off. And of course, even cooking was the same for my poor mother, because, you know, if we had no water, we had to wait. Okay, the time's coming, get the water so we could make the food. Yeah, so it was quite crazy. But you know what? We were such a family like this. My mother sacrificed so much. I remember many times when she would go over to, let's say, a neighbor's house that she would go to visit, or somebody would have a birthday or something like, and she would bring home. I remember so specifically one day she brought home a little tiny sliver piece of cake that the neighbor had made for the birthday, and she brought it home. And so this was a life lesson for me as a mother. She brought it home and she put it on the table, and I was there with my little brother, and she cut it in two and she put a piece in front of us, my piece and my brother's piece, and she didn't have any of it. So those were the kind of sacrifices that my mom made from the beginning. She, if there was any, she would give to us, and she would not have any herself. So those are lessons that have stuck with me, that have really put me on the path to be a good mother to my own kids and be able to provide for them and strive to always give before you take.
Oh,
So
that's so taking.
My mom is such a great and amazing woman, and I'm really blessed. I mean, by no means am I well off, but we had such a strong family unit that was the richness of life. And I took this, and even here the same thing. I mean, my mother and I, we've always been close. She's always given, and even here in Canada, as much as she can, she gives to me and she gives to my children. That's always been what her soul and her heart is all about.
I mean, this is such a great, as you say, lesson to experience love. Thanks for sharing that. And of course, next time you see your mom, bless her and say thank you. That she's just a beautiful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, she must have been a very beautiful channel for experiencing love, you know. So, of course, sometimes we get a little bit messed up with what we need to do in order to show love. I grew up like that too. So your mother, she wanted the best for you guys, right? That's what you could see, and so we can hear that probably through how you describe that. And I think anyway, how people can show or demonstrate what they are able, you know, to really give in love and unconditionally give it to someone else is an act of love in my, you know, humble experiences. And we just have to be more open what's possible also as moms, right? And then there was, by the way, the next situation you had that may have contributed to your stroke situation, that you experienced an opposite of so-called love in your own family. Is that what you want to talk about, or?
Yes, so the breakdown of my marriage was actually, yes, quite painful. And that's when I actually was, that's when I internalized a lot of the negativity that I was talking about earlier. And my shock and inability to even deal with, and of course I was very ill prepared to deal with the breakdown of my family. And I was just at a point where, to be honest, it was like I lost everything. I mean, here I was face to face with the possibility of dying because of this stroke. And then of course I was dealing with the fact that I had lost my marriage. So what had been my foundation was gone. The family that I had built was gone. We were no longer a family in the true sense of the term. And so I felt like the pillars of my, and of course, because I had the stroke, I wasn't actually at work. Of course, I had to take time off to heal. So the biggest pillars of my life were gone. My family was gone, my marriage was gone, my work was gone, my health was gone. So here I was, stripped of everything. And of course, what's the first thing that we go to? Because we've been programmed and yeah, we've been programmed to feel anger towards the things that we lose. And of course, that's the first thing that I was angry. I was angry about the whole situation. How could this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? It's not fair. So again, that whole mentality of looking at the negative side of things, instead of saying, I'm so grateful I'm alive, and my kids are great, and they're alive, and they're happy, and life goes on. And by no means was I the first person to have a broken marriage. I was probably just another statistic. So clearly I was able to look at how many empowered women were able to pick up and move forward with life and rebuild and become successful and become strong and empowered and be able to provide for their children. So I was not in that mindset at the time. And that was actually one of the big aha moments that I had to shift, when I had to realize that, hey, this is an opportunity here for rebirth. And I am brought to the next, I guess, door, for lack of a better term, for my transformation to go into the next phase. And it was actually then that I became excited, because it was, I'm like, oh, it's the unknown. We don't know. And I was just as excited when I immigrated to Canada, when I came from Romania. And, you know, it was like a whole new world. It's like, look at all the amazing things you can do here. So I had to shift my mentality back to that. And I had to push away the anger and the whole idea of like how everything is unfair and how much of a victim I am, which was really, really stupid when I look back on it now, and be able to be present in the moment and concentrate on what's positive and really growing that. So that was another big life lesson that I took from it. And so now I look again back on it to say, see, if I did it, you know, through a stroke, I mean, I lost my marriage and my health in one shot, killing two birds with one stone type of thing. And yeah, and you know what, to be honest with you, if I can leave your viewers with a piece of advice, is that when you concentrate on the positive that you have, you make that grow. When you give attention to that, when you give energy to what's positive in your life, it'll grow. It'll grow, and it'll help you go take the next step to the next level. And then you grow from there, and then you grow and you grow. And here I am, stroke behind me, divorce behind me, and I'm happy and fulfilled, and everything is great. And I'm concentrating, and I took the lessons. Of course, life has a funny way of giving you lessons. I took the lessons that it's important to really concentrate on the things that you have, on the things that you love, on the things that are important to you, and you make them grow.
Beautiful. Oh, that's just a beautiful saying. And I mean, you went through a lot of proactive steps. Anger, if we wouldn't have a label for it, and if we wouldn't say this is anger, it's actually a beautiful energy that catapults you from not being able to do something into get you into gears. And it did, right? So sometimes I see also in my family, people start to get angry about situations. It just mobilizes them to get into their own actions and getting real to themselves. So there must be something, it's not real or it's not fine for them. And therefore they start to shift their attention. And it's exactly as you say, if you place your attention on the things you want, not on the things you don't want, right? So you let that grow. That is the power everyone has, and it's very simple. Simone is a beautiful example for it. I love seeing that, you know, so, and she has all the abilities to, hand that to someone else. And I mean, just by being with you, I could imagine, like your son, I saw your son, very healthy and strong looking young man, beautiful, right? So I see that whatever's given to you will grow. So therefore, I definitely encourage, someone wants to contact Simone for her abilities after she had the stroke. She is now a specialist for detoxification and regeneration, level 1 and 2, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
graduated.
you did this all the way. Good job. So she is, I mean, not just having her own experience, which is the majority of the foundation of a really good, I mean, practitioner, helping other people to be empowered. She also catched up in her education what always needs to come up. You know, Simone did the right way for her, and she will be a very good example for anyone wants to heal themselves, wants to empower themselves. And if you resonate with her, so I will place the contact information right at the end of the video. All right, Simone, is there anything you would like to share at the end of this interview?
No, I just wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show and on your channel and to share my story. I really hope that I have been able to at least plant a seed in even one person out there about the power that we really have to support ourselves on our healing journey, how important it is to really tap into that power and to really reach out to the people that are so eager to help and to be able to go out there and seek the knowledge and the wisdom that is so available right in front of our eyes to be able to really help us move forward, no matter what kind of hardship life throws at you, truly.
That is a beautiful saying. And with that, true better you, Simone Claridge, says goodbye and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.